Hey y'all, it's Gabe the Nutritionist here, and today's video is going to be on quicker wound healing. So whether you were in surgery or for whatever reason, right? And this is basically how I followed it up, right? Maybe you fell off your bike and you got a compound fracture and your bone sticking out through your skin, you got to fix that, right? Maybe you got stabbed outside your ATM, maybe there's a hunting accident, you got shot, maybe you, I don't know, were outside and you got gored by a boar. Point being, right, if you have an injury, it takes time to heal. And the thing is, whether it's going to be surgery for a procedure or, you had an accident, we all heal more or less the same way. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to put together some quick tips for people to have faster healing, better recovery, and have a nicer looking wound. You see some people, they get some nasty scars. You see other people, you barely see anything. And the idea is if you give your body the right nutrition, right, the right minerals, the right vitamins, the specific amino acids you need, right, then you could pull up your recovery pretty fast, much quicker than usual. So I'm going to go over the four stages of wound healing, how that kind of works, what it means, and what we could do from a dietary point of view to help us heal better when you're in recovery. So whether you're at a surgery, you could then, eat foods that'll help nourish your body to heal quicker. I saw a study the other day about how people who eat high protein rich meals often, stay a lot less. And I do wonder why certain places do not give a high protein diet, even just for healing, right? And the shortcuts of time. The reality is, people lose money, right? Imagine if you stayed, I don't know, a few days less in the hospital, that's a lot less they get to bill you. And, you gotta take your health into your own hands, because no one else is gonna do it for you. And, maybe you're a caretaker, maybe you're providing for someone, and you want to see them heal quicker after surgery, or like I talked about, maybe there's an accident, maybe someone got shot in the wound, you know? So, point being, right, we're going to talk about this. And that's because if you're eating a standard American diet, you already have an issue. You're not eating complete proteins. It's probably, going to be a lot of wheat, a lot of grains, crappy amounts of veggies, right? Uh, Probably some fruit, not a lot of it, of course, but there'll be some of that. There'll be protein, whatever, right? I'm seeing a bunch of protein crap now and everything, right? Now there's like like a protein Cheeto puff, and there's like protein fake Doritos looking things, and they're putting protein in everything, right? But it's just like whey protein. That's fine, I guess, if you're trying to build muscle. But we're trying to build and heal and recover a wound, an injury, right? Or even something surgical. So that isn't going to be the complete protein you want, right? Because we're kind of focusing on glycine for that. But point being, right? You should always eat a nice piece of meat because no matter what powder you have, it'll never match that profile of a good piece of protein, right? Good piece of beef, a ribeye, a nice lamb shank, right? A good bison, you can't replicate the nutritional powerhouse inside of that. So another thing is there's also a deficiency in like zinc, right? When you think of a standard American diet, you should think, grains, right? It's very grain heavy. And the thing is, there's not a lot of zinc in grains. There's not a lot of zinc in fruits. There's not a lot of, zinc in veggies. You gotta eat a lot of meat to get plenty of zinc. K1, you get that from leafy green veggies, You got like avocados you can get it from. You got romaine lettuce you can get that from. Cabbage you get that from. Leafy greens can help you with that, right? And that's the most important thing for the clotting factor. So when you have an injury, right, you get a bunch of blood leaking out of you. So the goal is to stop the bleeding and to let it coagulate, let it build up, and to let it dry. So the wound can close and you stop losing blood because, again, right, you don't want to bleed out. You want to keep your blood. Very important, right? So it's important to eat plenty of K1 regularly in a diet, right? So if you ever do get into a sort of accident, you're to have plenty of K1 and you're able to, self-stabilize your wound. And of course, if it's a very severe wound, then you got to go to the emergency room and they're going to help you not, bleed out and die, right? They're going to do what they do to help you. But just just to note that right how K1 is important in that regard. K2 is important more or less indirectly, and so as far as it's putting calcium in the right places, like your bones, like your teeth, and you also do need calcium for when you do bleed, because it forms this little matrix, and that matrix, it helps it with the clotting. Then you have, seed oils, right? High sugar, that's a standard American Western diet. And that's going to deplete you out of vitamin C, what you need for the collagen, and magnesium, again, you're fighting oxidative stress, so you're losing vitamin C, magnesium, you're deficient in minerals, and it is amino acids, but I'm not going that specific, basically glycine. So let's look at the four phases of wound healing, right? So you have what's called hemostasis, right? So the whole goal is to stop the bleeding. You get a little temporary seal, right? Blood vessels constrict to, reduce the blood loss, right? Because you don't want to lose blood and die, right? Because that's what happens, right? When you have a wound and you can't close it. So depending on the severity of your wound, right, this could take seconds to hours. So we have endothelin peptides. Their system activates platelets. It adheres to the exposed collagen, your skin. They're the von Willebrand factor. You got a release of ADP, thromboxane A2, serotonin to activate the clotting cascade. And this converts fibrinogen into fibrin to form a stable clot mesh. So you have this sort of fibrin scaffold formation, right? Like scaffolding on a building. It builds around that wound, and then everything goes there to do its job. So just to have a sort of picture, you got your injury, let's say you got stabbed, then you get this platelet forming, right? It's like that dark blood, kind of like scab looking thing. Then eventually it coagulates enough, then you have the fibrin, stable clot is formed, and you don't have that bleeding anymore. Ideally, right? But, sometimes if you're not careful, your wounds can open up, right? And you don't want that to happen, right? So it's usually when you're injured, you gotta rest so you don't, upset it. So K1 is important because it activates all these clotting factors, right? Calcium is required cofactor in multiple clotting steps, and proteins are needed to produce fibrinogen and clotting proteins. And the first phase matters because the clot formation is poor with prolonged bleeding. Then it means you have a weak healing foundation, right? AKA you're lacking certain minerals, right? Certain nutrients and proteins. Because the clot is not just a plug, but it's a scaffold for repair, right? So basically, you're closing this hole, right, to stop the bleeding, and at the same time as you're closing it, right, this thing blocking it is also going to be a sort of mesh. So everything can go there as scaffold and do the repairs. And, if a wound doesn't stop bleeding, right, you hold it down with gauze, no matter what you do, right, then you gotta go to the hospital, right? Just because some wounds can heal on their own and some wounds cannot, right? Like, you gotta get help. Well, like, I think there's like it's like this tri-dagger, right? It's like spiral, kind of like toroidal in a way. Where apparently, like, if you stab someone, like, it's hard to, like, stop that bleeding. Because it's like a weird twist into, like, how it stabs a person. So yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna get stabbed with that, but just to be mindful, right? And if you have a bleeding that doesn't stop, you gotta go to the doctor. Gotta go to the emergency room. So imagine this, right? You get the sort of scaffolding like in a building being constructed, but it goes around the wound, and then the body does its magic to help you. But again, that needs raw resources, raw materials. You need material to build the building, and you need materials to build the scaffolding to then build the building. That makes sense, right? And the workers do their job. So the second part of this, it's called inflammation. This is the goal for the body to clean the wound and prevent infection as the skin is exposed. The body will vasodilate, aka blood vessels will expand. This causes that redness, the heat, and the swelling. It's driven by histamine, prostaglandins, nitric oxide, and neutrophil infiltration. These are going to be your first responders that come to help you if there's any bacteria, anything foreign, to, eliminate it from the body so it doesn't get infected. This kills bacteria. This may cause reactive oxygen species, again, like kind of like a little war going on. You kill any foreign invaders there through the enzymes. You remove debris, anything like stuck in there. Like you have a thorn that's stuck and like eventually like it gets pushed out. Then you have macrophage activation, right? Plus neutrophils after 24, 48 hours, like it goes and it eats it. Part of the immune system. Then you have phagocytosis, which is the cleanup crew. Then you got growth factors like TGF beta, I believe vascular endothelial growth factor, PDGF, and they're released to do this part, right? So you have this fibrin clot, right, which happens in the first phase of hemostasis. You get the neutrophil, this kills foreign invaders. You get the macrophage, it kills foreign invaders. You have these here, right, the TGFs, the VGFs. So what happens here is that they're going to form new blood vessels. So you have more roads, more streets, more piping to the site of injury. So your immune system can come in and do its job. Then you have collagen at some point later that comes to do the rebuilding from the extracellular matrix. And eventually, at some point, within, weeks, months, even years, depending on the severity of your wound, this will just go back to looking like normal skin again. So then you have, wait, let me explain this part. So again, right, you have proteins, aka amino acids. They're needed to build immune cells. Glutamine is a really important one. It fuels immune cell response. It's very ubiquitous. It's one of the most available amino acids in the body. And again, right, just because it's a lot, you can still need more. So, like I say, eat plenty of beef. Zinc supports immune signaling and enzyme function to regulate inflammation properly. Eat more beef for that. Vitamin C protects tissues from oxidative damage and supports immune cell function, and actually helps in the formation of the collagen, right? I think there was a study somewhere where if you paired vitamin C with collagen, it actually, I'm blanking on the term specifically what's being said, I don't want to mince words, but basically it made collagen work more effectively being produced. Then you have this face mattering because a little inflammation may increase the risk of infection, right? You gotta kill what's in there, right? Whatever you got stabbed with, whatever caused that damage, there's going to be bacteria and your body needs to kill it so there's no infection, right? Last thing you need is an infection when you're trying to heal a wound. And on the other hand, too much inflammation may cause more tissue damage, causing a chronic wound. Balances everything. So to an extent, right, vitamin C, antioxidant, zinc, a really good antioxidant. So, this is going to help you prevent any further unnecessary damage, especially, in the immune system fighting these infections, if you had any, right, or bacteria. Then you have proliferation. The goal is to rebuild tissue and close the wound. This is where actual repair and rebuilding happens. The first part of proliferation is the fibroblasts. They migrate into the wound to produce collagen. So in the beginning, it is collagen type 3. It's a weaker form of collagen, but it's enough to do the job in the scaffolding, right, for the extracellular matrix to kind of build out that early scaffold. And I believe later on, at some point, once they're a little more healed, you then have this conversion or this removal where you replace the type 3 collagen with type 1 collagen, and then that makes it strong, flexible tissue, like good quality skin. Then you have 2, right? Once you put that type 3 there, it forms the framework of the new tissue, and this requires amino acids, right? Proteins. This is going to require glycine, proline, lysine, and these are amino acids from protein, right? So like I said, right, eat plenty of beef, right? Eat red meat. I'm a fan of red meat just because it's got everything you need. The white meats like the pork and the chicken are a bit lacking, but, if that's your only option, then, that's better than nothing, right? Vitamin C helps you for the stabilization of collagen, right? Because I think lysine and proline help form the backbone and the structure of the collagen. Then you have angiogenesis. This is the new growth of blood vessels, and it's driven by vascular endothelial growth factor to ensure oxygen delivery and nutrient supply, right? These are going to be like your supply routes to the injury site to help rebuild it, right? Kind of like FEMA, or, like whenever there's like a disaster, right? Like, I guess like Katrina or whatever, right? Like the military boom goes there and they have all the supplies and they're escorting people and evacuating people and putting them, in places that are safe. So in a way, it's kind of how your body will react in that regard. Then you have granulation of tissue formation. This is a combination of new capillaries, right? Where you have fibroblasts and collagen matrix. That's actually related to this pipeline of all the nutrient and oxygen delivery. And then you have epithelialization, in which skin cells, the keratinocytes, migrate across the wound to rebuild the outer layer, right? So eventually, at that point, right, you kind of have the outer layer, where it was like an open, ugly wound, becoming prettier and going back to normal. So in this regard, right, you have protein supplies the collagen amino acids, vitamin helps enable collagen cross-linking, so it helps you form the extracellular matrix even better. for the scaffolding. Zinc supports the DNA synthesis, so it helps you make the new DNA, helps you with the cell division and the new cells. Vitamin helps regulate the epithelial cell growth. Copper activates lysyl oxidase, which strengthens collagen. It's also important in that role with collagen. And this phase matters because it determines how fast your wound is closing up. So if you have weak healing or you have longer time to heal, this could indicate the need for more nutritional support, right? Because there are some people out there that have wounds, and I think like some of them are gonna be like diabetics, right? So I would assume, right, in my opinion, right? Because a diabetic has a lot of sugar, a lot of carbs. They're probably so far gone in collagen and vitamin C through the advanced glycated end products and glycation that it reduced and has used up the vitamin C in that regard, glycine other amino acids, right? So basically, that's why if you have a wound and it won't close up easily, you're lacking vitamin C, you're lacking zinc, and you're lacking the amino acids, right? So I'll tell you a little more about how to get more collagen protein, right? Because it can be kind of hard, even in a muscle meat diet. So this example has an S-char, so this is from a deep wound or a burn. It's like a black leather kind of thing right here, right? It's more severe. You would need a doctor to help you with that, remove it through debridement. Ideally, you want a scab. That means it's healing pretty well and it's not as bad as it is. So here's a proliferation of this happening. You get the restoration of the matrix modeling. Everyone's doing their jobs. You get the platelets forming, cytocoagulation, macrophages to, take care of old debris, neutrophils to fight any infections, fibroblasts to build more skin, which would be the more endothelial cells, so it'll be like the collagen 3 protein in the beginning. Then again, macrophages, neutrophils fighting bacteria. So just to know a difference between a scab and an S-char, right? The scab is dried crusty blood that protects the wound, and it falls off by itself. The S-char is going to be on you, and to remove the S-char once you fully healed, then you'd have a doctor do medical debridement on you to remove it. Then you have remodeling. This could take months, even a year, maybe even longer, depending on the wound, right? Because, some wounds are worse than others, right? You could get stabbed by a little thorn, you could have a dog rip a chunk of meat out of you, or you could have your leg blown off, right? So, there's different kinds of wounds and different kinds of healing to occur, right? Same process, it just, depends on how long it takes, right? So the goal of remodeling is to strengthen and refine the tissue, right? This is what I talked about earlier. You have this collagen transition from type 3 collagen to be replaced with a stronger type 1 collagen. You have collagen realignment. This improves cross-linking to improve tensile strength as fibers align across the stress lines of the wound. So basically, you want to have nice skin you could pull on, you could tug on, won't be weak, you could maybe scratch a little bit, and you won't have an issue, right? It won't open up and it won't get bad, right? So that's kind of the whole point of why you got to be kind of like courteous and cautious to your wound even after, as it takes time for it to go through the full healing process. Then you have capillary reduction. So once the body believes it's done a pretty good job, it's going to remove all the extra blood vessels that were going to the wound. And you could tell this happens, right? Because you have a scar. And if the scar is red, that means it's still healing. If the scar is not red and it leaves, then that's when capillary reduction has moved, or it's finished with that process. So again, here is the whole thing in a nutshell. Hemostasis, you stop the bleeding. Inflammation is part 2. You defend it, you do the clotting, you clean up, get rid of bacteria. 3, proliferation. You do what you can with the fibroblast and the cells and the collagen and the extracellular matrix to form as much skin as possible over time. And then 4th, once you kind of have your scaffolding going on pretty well, then you replace it with better quality type 1 collagen. And then eventually that's just like the finishing touches, right? So now that we've gone over the 4 stages of wound healing in a nutshell, right, we could talk about how to optimize the process of wound healing. This is especially of interest to those who have severe wounds or wounds that are difficult to heal, and by nourishing the body with the tools it needs, workers can build it back better, right? Your body can build it back better. How are you going to build a brick house if you've got no bricks? You know what I mean? How are you going to build a house without piping, right? Then there's no water. How are you going to build a house without, any electricity, right? You got no wires running through it, right? So, like, everything's important, right? Again, like a house, right? You need a foundation, right? If you don't have a foundation for your house, right, it'll probably crumble at some point, right? Over time through the earth naturally moving its plates. So, protein, aka amino acids, muscle meat, it is, in my opinion, the sore core tenet of healing. Again, right, we're all walking flesh bags, we're all made of protein, like, this is the majority of what we are, right? Besides water, of course. But we need quality protein and complete quality protein so we can replenish our body. Most people know the importance of protein from a muscle building perspective, which I'm kind of annoyed with. Because protein, muscle, the end, right? I mean, yeah, but like, really? Well, like, there's a lot more to protein, right? It is more than just bigger muscles. Proteins are amino acids. It helps you build enzymes, neurotransmitters, protein structures, peptides, which are so popular people are talking about now. And in the context of wound healing, we do need protein. And protein is specific amino acids that we need, right? So if you're in a standard American diet, you're going to be low in protein and more likely much lower in these specific kinds of proteins. And for this purpose, I'm a big fan of collagen, right? Those powders, right? They're better for that reason in that they have glycine and they got proline, right? They're more rich in that. So glycine for the collagen backbone, proline for the collagen stability, arginine for the nitric oxide to stimulate blood flow. Arginine is well known, especially paired with L-citrulline for men to get a stiffy again. But again, right, arginine is important, right, in wound healing. Then you get glutamine, which is the fuel for the immune system. And if you eat plenty of meat, you'll be fine with glutamine. If you don't eat, you know, like bone broths, you don't really eat ground beef, you don't do like gelatin, you don't do the tough, gelatinous, tough ligaments and stuff like that for meat, then you're gonna wanna include some of these, right? Highlights collagen protein. Some people like to do gelatin powder on top of their meats to kind of balance that. And for some people, they do better with that, which is pretty awesome. So you want to do this, right? So you activate mTOR, which is mammalian target of rapamycin, for tissue growth and supports your fibroblast activity, right? To, boom, get that more skin going in for that collagen formation. Getting plenty of protein is also important to prevent muscle wasting during the recovery process, as increased protein can preserve muscle mass. So whether, depending on the severity of your wound, right, maybe you'll be in bed for a week, maybe you'll be in bed in a few days, maybe you'll be in bed for a month. I don't know, right, depending on your wound and or if you had, just surgery. But point being, this is all gonna help you with that. So eat more beef, eat more bison, eat more lamb. If you cannot, then, do more chicken, right? And then take a zinc supplement. So the reason I'm a big fan and diehard, right, for red meat is because it's got a little bit of everything, and that makes it pretty awesome for the most part, right? Not perfect, right? But it's better than most things, right? Like if you had to pick a multivitamin, a multi-mineral that won't be toxic and it's not going to kill you, I would pick, beef, bison, or lamb, right? Because it gives you what you need. Whereas if you do beef liver, you could get toxicity from that in many different regards. And often talk about the vitamin A toxicity from that, talk about heavy metals in that, talk about people that get copper overload from that. So while on paper, like a liver is nutrient dense, I've seen it backfire for a lot of people and causing misery, right? So just for that, right, I'm a believer in all muscle meat protein, right? It's the best you could do. So, right, what is an essential amino acid? What does it mean to be a complete protein? So, a complete protein contains all essential amino acids. And what makes them essential is the body cannot make it on its own. So, what's cool is if you're lacking certain other amino acids, your body can convert it and make other amino acids. But if you're eating a ton of meat, like I could care less, right? But my concern is glycine, because we need glycine for collagen, right? That's our goal right now. So glycine is not considered an essential amino acid, but I do argue it's essential in how much humans need it. And in my opinion, and from my clinical experience and expertise, glycine tends to be the most limited amino acid in the standard American diet, especially plant-based vegan and vegetarian diets that are low in protein. I recommend people use hydrolyzed collagen protein, bone broth soups, ground beef, and gelatin as their great sources of glycine. And glycine is a lot more, right? It helps you with sleep. It's to an extent like an antioxidant because it helps you make glutathione, really important. Of course, talking about collagen production at the moment, can help with hemoglobin production, blood sugar support, creatine production, helps you with their mood and making neurotransmitters, which improves your cognitive health. Glycine's pretty awesome, right? So if you want to learn more about that, you could click here. I gotta do the thingamajiggy there, but yeah. Vitamin C is important. It's really good paired with collagen. So it activates enzymes prolyl hydroxylase and lysyl hydroxylase. And what these enzymes do, right, is it stabilizes collagen structure to improve skin and wound healing. So taking vitamin C as a cofactor with collagen is a great combo to improve healing. Without vitamin C, collagen can become pretty weak. Wound closure becomes poor, and re-injury may occur easily. It's also an antioxidant that helps reduce oxidative damage in wounded tissue, right? So again, eat foods that are low sugar so you're not being robbed out of vitamin C. So we're going to be talking about bell peppers, right? Lemons, limes, berries, acerola cherries, guavas, kiwis, and oranges. I'm a big lemon lime kind of guy. I like berries too. That's my preference. But like I said, right, do what works well for you, right? Then you got zinc. I love zinc. I'm a zinc guy. Zinc plays a role in DNA synthesis for cell division. And in my opinion, zinc is more than just a mineral because it does so much, kind of like magnesium, right? They do a lot. These guys are like juggernauts. So zinc supports keratinocyte migration, immune defense, and collagen synthesis. So zinc helps to specifically replicate DNA to create new cells the body needs for repair, creating the fibroblast, the keratinocytes, and the immune cells. It also activates a matrix metalloproteinase to regulate the remodeling of collagen tissue. Let's see. So some error here because I was done here. So if zinc is deficient, then wound healing may be delayed and there could be an increased risk of infection. So zinc is going to help you against, invaders to your immune system like bacteria, especially if they want to steal your iron, right? Then that'll be for what was it? The metalloproteinase, for the matrix, which is pretty, like MMP9, I think. Then you have the replication of DNA, which is really important, right? To an extent, humans are like Theseus' ship with old instructions that goes on for ever until we die. What we do is just copy DNA and copy DNA and copy DNA. And the idea is over time, the copy of the DNA gets weaker. Like, you ever seen an old meme on the internet? And the latest image of that old meme has been reposted and shared so many times, it's kind of fuzzy and it's not looking so good compared to the original image. That's essentially what can happen with DNA when you replicate it so many times over time. But that's just the way we are, right? And that's what zinc does, right? It helps you to replicate the DNA. And I could argue if you have a folate deficiency, which I'm gonna kind of click in there, then your DNA instructions could be off if you have some kind of odd skin issue, and that could be disrupting your healing in some way, right? Just an assumption if people have something weird no one can figure out, right? Just to food for thought, right? Because someone could watch this video and they could be like, that's my key, right? I get a folate deficiency, so I need folate, so zinc can replicate DNA even better. Because folate helps to repair DNA, right? And last thing you want to do, right, is have DNA be replicated that is dysfunctional, or that's not working the way it's supposed to be working. So the best easily available foods high in zinc is going to be red meat like beef, bison, lamb. Even dark meat poultry like thighs are also higher in zinc than white meat poultry. So if you like the dark meat chicken, then it's also a decent option too, right? Vitamin K1 and K2, clotting and calcium regulation. Vitamin K1 activates clotting factors 2, what is that, 5, 6, 7? I think that's what, like 9, that's 10. I'm not a Greek Roman numeral kind of guy. So essentially, vitamin K1 activates gamma glutamyl carboxylase, and this helps you with clotting proteins to bind calcium to the wound's injury site for hemostasis, which is, if you remember right, the first site of wound healing. When this happens, right, you gotta have the clot, right? And calcium helps you with that, right? So, pretty important, right? The K1 calcium combo to help you with that. Then you have vitamin K2. It activates proteins like osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein, and this ensures calcium goes to the right tissues for repair to prevent soft tissue calcification, right? Because you shouldn't have calcium in your eye, you shouldn't have calcium in your skin, right? Like deposits. You shouldn't have calcium in your bile ducts, you shouldn't have calcium in the breast tissue, you shouldn't have calcium in your coronary artery, right? So K2 helps you with that to regulate that. And you want to learn more about the relationship of vitamin K2, calcium, vitamin D3, then click that link right there, which I did put in there, and you can learn more about this. Then you got vitamin K1, you get this from leafy greens like broccoli, lettuce, asparagus, cauliflower, and cucumber. Then you have K2, get it from red meat, eggs, poultry, aged cheeses like Parmesan, get it from fermented foods like natto, sauerkraut, and kimchi. So if you don't like those foods, then especially the fermented foods, they're much more richer in this. You just take a supplement, and a lot of people, they're happy with that. Calcium for structural and signaling mineral. As you know, you need calcium for the blood clotting cascade, for the cell signaling, and tissue repair. Most people think about calcium for strengthening bones and teeth, but it helps you with clots. It strengthens the fibrin clot so the bleeding can stop by converting prothrombin to thrombin. So if you want more calcium in your diet, do cheeses that you like, do milk, if you can, like A2 milk, dates, they're high in sugar, I think. I'm not a big fan of dates, but if, you're eating a higher carb diet, then, dates could be for you, right? Yogurt's pretty cool. A good quality kefir is pretty cool. Figs, right, I believe, have calcium too in them. Actually, we're thinking dates. I might have put that on accident. I'm going to delete dates. Because I don't know they do have calcium. Regardless, I'll leave it in there, right? And I'll check it again. And small fish, because again, the bones, right, from like sardines, right? I think salmon's pretty high in that. I think tuna has some good calcium in it. So, the small fishes, So, like sardines and sprats are a good option because you just, eat the bones and pretty good bioavailable. Other nutrients to consider would be iron, is required for oxygen transport, critical for healing tissue. After all, if you suffered a wound, depending on severity, you might have lost a little bit of blood or a ton of blood, right? So you need this for a cofactor, right? For your B3, B6, B9, B12, DNA synthesis, red blood cell production, energy metabolism, especially in the electron transport chain with the iron sulfur clusters, important for the energy. Then you have to eat the red meat for the heme iron, which is actually the best and easily absorbed form of iron. Fish, poultry, and pork work too, right? They have some iron. So if you're anemic, right, or you're a person suffering from, this idea, right, that you're not getting enough iron, then you probably might be plant-based, or you're more in that direction. So it might be time to eat red meat. While you could take a iron bisglycinate supplement, I find it personally better just eat red meat because it's quite a nutritional powerhouse packed with all sorts of vitamins and minerals that are going to help your body out. Then you got magnesium. It plays a role in ATP production, aka your energy. Reduces the stress response. Depending on the trauma, extra magnesium can help people relax from their accidents if they're in a fight or flight mode to ease into a relaxed parasympathetic state. Because some people, they get an accident and they're like traumatized and they get like anxiety and they just can't calm down. And I think to an extent they kind of burned out on magnesium and they burn out on vitamin B1. And if it's really bad, then they also probably burn out on vitamin B5. So if that's a person like you, right, like you just got severe trauma from an accident, right, then you might want to work on replenishing your magnesium, your vitamin B1, and your vitamin B5 from a psychological point of view. But magnesium, for the most part, right, it should help you do that, right? So again, I recommend topical magnesium spray or lotion, rub it on your body. Over time, you'll feel relaxed, you feel, relieved, and you could, just chill out, right? Because there's people that just cannot do that, right? And it's not because they're mental, they're lacking what their body needs to help them calm down. And then you got vitamin A for critical epithelial skin repair, as it regulates cell differentiation. So this is where it stimulates the fibroblast production of collagen type 1 and type 3 skin, and not much needed. I don't think people need a ton of vitamin A, and I see this from the point of view and that vitamin A, kind of like going back to like Theseus' ship, right? All it does is it speeds up your recycling repair process. And I think, in my opinion, right, like personally, I don't think more of that is going to help in the long term. Because again, right, at some point, you're going to be down to like the last copy of your DNA, like before you die. So I think it's better to kind of like conserve it as much as possible where you're functional and you're doing well. Now, unless we're able to get to the point in the human genome and DNA sequencing where we could like remove the cap on the ends of the DNA strands, whatever you call them, the little end caps, the telomeres, right? Then maybe more vitamin A could be cool and optimal, right? But in my opinion, I don't view people needing a ton of vitamin A, right? Just the most minimal amount, you'll be fine. Copper required for collagen cross-linking, lysyl oxidase for stronger tissue formation. It has more basilar endothelial growth factor, in which you have the angiogenesis to form new blood vessels to the wound. It also activates hypoxia-induced factor 1 in the process, not much is needed. You get a decent amount from salmon, avocados, tofu, shiitake mushrooms, and oysters. You have two, you'll eventually go over the RDA. And I don't think copper is something people need to go heavy on because people have copper water pipes and they're getting exposed to a lot of copper. And in the hair mineral tests I see, people without trying just already have a lot of copper. So that's interesting, right? And I'm more concerned about from an oncological point of view, right? When it comes to cancer, about how increased cancer can actually, in a negative way, right, increase the growth of tumors, and it could actually increase the chance of migration, right? So we're talking about like metastasis, and when people lower copper, people tend to do better when they have cancer, right? So, copper requires a fine balance, right? So, why the standard American diet fails? A slow healing, right? We want faster, good, efficient healing, and we don't want to, like be in bed longer than we should, right? We want to go back to our lives and do what we want to do and work and just enjoy ourselves, right? When you're stuck in a bed all day on your phone, doom scrolling, I don't think it's good, right? And TV isn't that much better, right? Like TV shows just suck now. I know when people do watch something on Netflix, it's like The Office, and that's like lame. People should be less lame, right? Like my opinion, right? But that's how I feel about that. So high linoleic acid, aka seed oils, increase oxidative stress through lipid peroxidation, which damages cell membranes in a sort of chain reaction effect. High sugar glycates collagen, causing weaker tissue. This is arguably the reason why there's visible aging. People talk about how, oh my god, you look so young, you look so beautiful, right? To older people, and then you find out they don't really eat a lot of sugar, and they eat a lot more meat, and they eat fat, and they don't really do seed oils, right? I'm still looking for someone who doesn't eat meat at all, who does a lot of seed oils, and smokes and drinks, and it looks good, right? But no, that's not the reality, right? People smoke, they drink, they age, right? Because they're using up, you know, all that stuff you need, right? All that vitamin C, right? All that zinc, all of your antioxidants, all your cysteine to make glutathione, all that glycine to help you make glutathione, right? Because it's a tripeptide. So again, we kind of know, we understand, right? But again, a low nutrient density in such a diet has many missing key cofactors for repair that we just went over. So more or less this is going to be the daily strategy, right? You can eat 1 pound of protein per body weight, right? Emphasis on animal foods, right? Always animal foods for the most part, unless you're like eating a straw and you can't really chew or eat, then I could understand maybe your need for a whey protein or with a bonus with the collagen, right? Vitamin C from whole foods like fruits or supplementation. I don't think people need to supplement, right? I don't think people should do any more than like 500 milligrams. Some people do like 5 grams, and that's crazy. Like, you don't need that much. Zinc, short-term higher intake can help during the healing or an increase in red meat. If you eat a lot of red meat, you'll be fine, but if you feel like you need a boost, you could take like a zinc picolinate. You should be good. K1, K2, leafy greens with animal fats, right? Depends on what you're a fan of. You could do a K2, K1 supplement, which I'll have linked at the bottom. Hydration, electrolytes like sodium to replenish lost fluids. Depending on, your accident or what happened to you, you might have lost a lot of blood, so it's important to get sodium and water, and I mean, you'll get potassium for your meats, right, and your leafy greens and your milk, but, that's to help you with your replenishing of, your plasma, right? So examples of a hearty meal: steak or ground beef, salted well for, the sodium content, eggs, fruit, vitamin C, of course, leafy green veggies for the K1, of course. Then your collagen support is going to be from your bone broth, your gelatin, or collagen powder. There are some lifestyle factors that can help speed healing. Some people have said that when they get a little bit of sunlight on their wound, right, daily, they're able to heal a bit faster, right? Which I believe is because, and I think I've heard about this, right, how there's some hospitals and some doctors using a combination of like UV light and infrared light. I forgot which IR wavelength it is, but they're using that to stimulate the healing process. And I'm thinking, it's cool and all, right? But if you don't have access to that technology, then just like go outside and get a little bit of sun, right? Every day. So you have that stimulation, right? From the sun, which has the UV and the red light. So it's cool we're making toys to like try and copy the sun, but like just get sun, it's free. And hopefully live in a location where there's plenty of sunlight and it's not cloudy, right? Sleep for growth hormone release, manic stress, cortisol slows healing, of course, if you're really stressed out. So if you want to learn more about how you can reduce your stress and get better quality, restful, and restorative sleep, then click here, which I put in nice. So conclusion, healing is built, it's not a chance, right? You don't just throw a dice and you hope you heal better, right? Like, you can put some effort into healing and your body will do a much better job, right? And your body wants to heal the best it can, right? But it just needs the raw materials to do so. So nutrition plays a pivotal role in expediting the wound healing process. Just like a construction site, right? If the workers don't get paid, no one's going to construct anything, right? If there's no construction material, then the workers can't build anything. It's a team effort, and that's just the way it is, right? With different nutritional amino acids and vitamins and minerals working together to heal your wound. It's kind of like a job site, right? You got the architect, you got the engineer, you got the project manager, construction workers, you got the specialists. Everyone has a role to play, and we just went over what all that is. So here you have supplements, and again, right, maybe you took my recommendations, maybe you healed up pretty quick and you're like, wow, that's awesome, I want to actually like get healthy now and stop eating like Burger King crap and stop eating Doritos. Then you click this link and, it'll tell you about what foods you can eat. Again, even though I don't recommend supplementation unless you really, really need it, then I tell people get topical magnesium and molybdenum because that's just what we're pretty much low on. This is probably not for you, right? We're just talking about wounds, but this is like once you get better outside of healing, you can do a hair tissue mineral analysis test, and we could test your hair and see what your minerals look like and how to balance that. Supplements, if you want to consult with me, Gabe the nutritionist, to guide you on which supplements you may or may not need, I can save you money, time, and importantly, expensive time-consuming trial and error. Yeah, people with a big stack of vitamins, and half of them do nothing, half of them make them feel worse, and maybe like a good 5 of them are like decent and they're doing something, right? So, I want to help people save money, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? You can go and do like some Brian Johnson bullshit and like barely get healthy and pay $1 million for his like stupid exclusive VIP club. But I'm like you're not that much better, right? Like, this is kind of like the US way of doing things, right? Kind of like for NASA and like, like really cool. We're going back to the moon, right, with Artemis 2, which is awesome. It's exciting for the future. They're going to see the backside of the moon, so maybe we'll see what's back there. The point being, during the space race, we spent a shit ton of money to make a pen that can write in space. and the Soviets just used a pencil. Same results, right? So again, right, you don't want to throw money at things just because you can, right? That's not effective, it's not efficient, and it's just fucking wasteful. Let's not be wasteful, right? So again, if you're a member of my Patreon, you can take advantage of the lifetime 30% discount off of all supplements. You can click there. Here's a list of everything. Got your zinc, molybdenum, magnesium, selenium, folate for metatetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme if you have that mutation, the motherfucker gene. Glutathione, if you feel like you need it, right? Depends on the person. Usually people that need it are people that come from a Lyme background or a mold background, right? But for some people, they take it and they feel better, so that would indicate you would need more protein, you would need more cysteine, you would need more glycine, so you could build your own, you know, glutathione tripeptide. Low dose B vitamin complex. This is like the least crappiest, least toxic I've seen. I'm still looking for better, right? Because RDA's, you know, I think they're still a little too high. But man, I've seen some crazy RDAs, and these is like the lowest RDAs I've seen, which are much more balanced and much more logical. Glycine, right? If you don't eat tough cuts of meat or meat stock, get some glycine there. Collagen, if you don't eat enough meat, get collagen there. N-acetylcysteine, as we talked about, glutathione, Glynac, same thing with glutathione. Vitamin K2, you might want this one. This is the one that's comboed with K1 and K2. And I believe it was I got it right here actually. Yeah, they should be the 5 milligram of MK4, the 1 milligram of K1, and the 90 micrograms of MK7. Yeah, so it should be this one. This is a really good one. And as always, if you take a supplement and you feel like shit, stop taking it and let me know, right? Because you could be reacting to the supplement, you could be mixing it with something else that's not working well. Maybe you're doing too much and you're like detoxing, like way too much, all that quick. Or maybe you're not taking enough, right? Like, this is what I do, right? I'm a nutritionist. This is what I'm here for, so that people hire me. So that people come to me. People come to me from like doctors and other nutritionists and, people they see on fucking Instagram ads and Facebook ads that are a bunch of, I don't want to be rude, right? I don't like throwing stones at other people, right? But they didn't help them the way they wished they got helped, right? They spent money and they didn't get what they wanted. So, that's not a cool thing, right? Like if you buy something, you should get what you want out of it, right? Now, of course, I can't turn into Superman and help you fly, right? But I can help you feel better and move on with your life by having better health, right? So again, right? I wanna thank everyone. I gotta fix this part because I just copy and pasted this. But again, yeah, I have all my guides here. Like reversing type 2 diabetes. That's kind of awesome. Man, more testosterone. If you want to sleep better, wake up rested. That's a big one for a lot of people. This is like, I think there was like a favorite article I have that's the most favorite, and I think everyone should read it. Tylenol folate, that was a big one. Breast cancer. This is just cancer in general, but people like focusing on the titties because, I mean, save boobs, right? Breast cancer is good for helping people care about women more, and we all have a woman we love. So yeah, I mean, this isn't just applied to breast, but it applies to all cancers, right? Because it talks about similar mechanics. Salt, sweet spots like 3 grams. Helping people with acid reflux and stomach pain, that's one for you if you need it. Uh, Trigger foods and the Food and Mood Journal helps you for some people. Food cravings, it helps people understand what they're lacking. You can skip this one. Glycine, right? If you want to learn more about it, how it's awesome, you click that one. Acne and what people do about it, if you need it. This is to help people with going to the gym, to make habits and stick with them, and that helps you with other parts of your life if you're a wishy-washy kind of person. Everything's about planning. You gotta plan everything, right? I mean, just do shit off the cuff, right? But it won't be amazing. Why people get sick from high dose B vitamins and B6 toxicity and what to do about it, right? Very important. Yeah. Yeah. How to validate your purpose in life to improve mental health and move in the right direction. Some people just don't know themselves. So click here for that article and you'll get some more ideas on who you are as a person and how other people are and why they are the way they are and how you could maneuver in that world and how to find a job that best strokes your ego, right? Everyone has an ego. If you stroke it right, you're happy. If other people stroke your ego right, you're happy. If you stroke their ego, they're happy too. That's just the reality of life, you know? We all want to feel good. How do they, I don't know, we get that one. Bread and beans are stealing nutrients from the foods you eat. You know, phytates, fuck them. They're also higher in nickel, so last thing you want. Which, I mean, I had a recent nickel article I should have put here, which I'll correct that. High dose calcium vitamin D3 may clog your heart, hurt your joints, and weaken your bones. How to fix it? Like I said, K2. That's how you do it. Keto diet can help with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. He was right and also wrong. Reality check, hard truth about Ozempic. I don't want to talk about it because every time I talk about this stupid GLP-1 drug, I get banned, I get censored, I get blacklisted. The algorithm like puts me down. So there's something insidious about this. You know, like it's being pushed everywhere, and you got to question why. And I've talked about it before. When I talk about it, you know, like I get shit for it. Not by actual people, but like by the algorithm. So there's something amuck running around. I made a list of low toxic foods, right? Because you know, just to put it out there, right? Iron overload hemochromatosis. This was an old article I revamped from my Substack. So if you come from my Substack, I revamped that one. The 9 steps to stop inflammation and boost glutathione naturally. This should be everyone's first article if you're serious about getting healthy. Which I need to reformat this for people to read this first. Parasite panacea paranoia. Why parasites do not cause all disease. It's really important. Some people claim it heals everything. They do take it and they don't get better. And they realize it was a joke. That's not to say parasites aren't a problem, but it's not every problem ever, right? So again, if you need a nutritionist that you like me, you think I'm cool, right? You want to work with me, I'll work with you. I can help you with type 2 diabetes and obesity. If you're tired all the time, I can help you figure out and nail it. One of my recent clients, I help with that. Stress and sleep. That I always integrate that to everything. So whatever you want help with, that kind of goes hand in hand. Toxic heavy metal detox nutrition. That's kind of like my big thing. Hormone balancing. I do that regardless of whatever we do. Academic detox nutrition. You'll be my client for quite a while because that takes time and love and support. Acid reflux and gastritis nutrition. That takes a while, but we'll get it down and fix it. If you don't have a gallbladder, it's going to be hard. Leaky gut nutrition. That's kind of everywhere. Always fix that while I'm doing something else. Skin and acne nutrition. That's part of detox. It's part of removing crap from your diet. Also getting down your minerals. Heart health nutrition. That's kind of easy. It's already everywhere. Fertility nutrition. That's always going to be like a zinc deficiency, selenium deficiency, lack of protein. Oncology cancer nutrition. That's a mix of everything, you know. I'm proud I've had people that go to their checkup every year and they're clean as a whistle. Nothing comes back. Knock on the wood. I am the wood. Mental health nutrition. That's a big one. People really need it now because people are all fucked up on, you know, old science that was actually fraud and has been debunked and makes no sense, and people still run on this chemical imbalance thing, which, yeah, it's a fraud, and Tom Cruise is right, you know? Can you believe that? So if you want to in-depth one-on-one personal consultation about how I can help you improve your health, your diet, nutrition, then you could click here. You could subscribe to my health coaching client list, and I'm going to reach out to you, and we'll talk about how we could best work with each other. If you're wanting to be like on a Zoom, on a Discord, on a phone call, you want to do email or text. Because once you hire me on retainer, you know, like, you could just use and abuse me for like, you know, the month, right? Which is pretty cool, right? Because a lot of people do this thing where they charge like 500 an appointment, 1,000 an appointment, and I'm like, it's just kind of ridiculous. And then people have plans and shit comes up, right? And I want to get paid. So as long as I'm on retainer, right, we're all happy, and you could use and abuse me, right? As opposed to losing money for an appointment that wasn't thorough. And I like to answer everyone's questions. I don't think anyone should ever leave an appointment with more questions. You should leave feeling like you know everything you want to get off your chest. And that's the way it should be, right? Because then if people go to the doctors and they're coming back with more questions, and they're like, what the fuck, man? Like, how do I navigate this? This is crazy. And again, if you're a member, click here. You get your 30% discount off of all full script supplements. And I want people to know that if you need something, reach out to me, talk to me. You can email me. Actually, I'm not going to start putting this. You can email me. Email me at New Start Nutrition Consulting gmail.com if you have any questions. I've had a few people email me and I've helped them and they're pretty happy. I'm a big email guy. I hate phone calls that don't leave a voice message because I'm going to assume you're some Indian guy spam calling me, trying to sell me insurance or talk about my non-existent account at something they're trying to, get information out of you. But yeah, um, this is all about wound healing. Whether you had surgery, whether you're out of the emergency room, you have a lot more you can do to help yourself, your body to heal the best that it possibly can, right? Because if you're low protein, right, you're missing on the zinc, right? If you're not eating, leafy greens, you get no vitamin K1. If you're not eating fermented foods, you're lacking K2. If you're not eating, dairy, you're lacking calcium. You're not eating, the high quality fruits, losing vitamin C. You're not eating the tough, gelatinous tissue, right? The ligaments from, a beef. Then you're not getting that, the glycine or the proline. Not eating enough red meat. You're not getting iron. So again, you also got to rest and, have proper hydration, with the sodium and drinking between 60 and 100 ounces of water, more or less, depending if, you know, temperature, climate, that kind of stuff, your activity levels. So yeah, it's going to be an hour, we're 57 minutes in, and I feel like it's best to end it. Because I want to get some rest and get this video ready, because it is my birthday tomorrow, and I want to celebrate it. So alright, everyone, thank you. God bless y'all. I appreciate it, and I do hope you're able to heal and recover as quick as possible. Because imagine if they did this in a certain setting where they would lose a ton of money because they can't bill you for extra days you stay there. You know what I mean? So yeah, thank you. God bless y'all. Have an amazing day. And yeah, take it easy.